It was a crisp autumn afternoon when David Thompson decided to take a scenic drive through the countryside. The leaves were painted in vibrant shades of orange and gold, and the sun cast a warm glow over the winding roads. David, a 35-year-old mechanic with a passion for cars and adventure, loved these moments of solitude. He often found inspiration in nature, allowing his mind to wander as he drove. As he cruised along the highway, he noticed a car parked on the side of the road. It was an older model sedan, its hood raised, steam billowing out like smoke signals. David's instincts kicked in. He couldn't just drive past someone in need. He slowed down and pulled over, parking his truck behind the stranded vehicle. Stepping out, he approached the car cautiously. A woman was sitting inside, her expression a mix of frustration and worry. She looked to be in her late 20s with tousled hair and a worried brow. David knocked gently on the window. "Hey there, do you need some help?" he asked with a friendly smile. The woman rolled down her window slightly, her relief palpable. "Oh, thank goodness. My name is Sarah. I think my car is overheated. I was on my way to an important meeting when this happened." David could see that she was visibly shaken. "No worries, let's take a look," he replied reassuringly. He opened the hood of her car and examined the engine. The coolant reservoir was empty and he could see signs of leakage. "Looks like you might have a coolant leak," he said, glancing back at Sarah. "Do you have any water or coolant with you?" Sarah shook her head, biting her lip in frustration. "I didn't think I'd need it. I just had this car serviced last week." David nodded sympathetically. "It happens more often than you'd think. Let's see if we can find a solution." He rummaged through his toolbox in his truck and found a spare bottle of coolant. "This should help get you to the nearest service station," he said, as he poured it into her car's reservoir. While working on her vehicle, David struck up a conversation with Sarah to ease her nerves. "So, what's this important meeting about?" he asked casually. Sarah sighed deeply, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm trying to secure funding for my nonprofit organization that helps homeless families get back on their feet." Her eyes sparkled with passion as she spoke about her work. "That sounds amazing. What inspired you to start it?" David asked, genuinely interested. She smiled softly, reflecting on her journey. "I grew up in foster care after my parents struggled with addiction. I always promised myself that if I ever got the chance to help others, I would." David listened intently as she shared her story, how she had faced numerous challenges, but had persevered to create something meaningful from her pain. Just as they were finishing up with the coolant, Sarah's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She glanced at it nervously before answering. "Hello? Yes, I'm on my way." Her face fell as she hung up abruptly. "What happened?" David asked. "It was my board member," she explained, anxiety creeping into her voice. "They're worried I won't make it to the meeting in time now that I'm stuck here." "Don't worry," David reassured her. "I can give you a lift to your meeting once we get your car sorted out." Sarah looked at him in disbelief. "Really? You'd do that for me?" "Of course, it's not every day you get to help someone with such an important cause," he replied with a grin. As they waited for the engine to cool down so they could check for any further issues, Sarah shared more about her organization, the struggles they faced and the success stories that kept her motivated. "I've seen families transform their lives," she said passionately. "It's incredible how just a little support can make such a difference." David nodded, feeling inspired by her dedication and resilience. He couldn't help but admire how someone who had faced so much adversity had turned it into an opportunity to uplift others. After checking everything under the hood again and ensuring it was safe to drive, David helped Sarah into his truck and they set off toward the meeting location. As they drove through the picturesque landscape, their conversation flowed easily, discussing dreams, challenges, and life experiences. But little did they know that this chance encounter would lead them both to uncover secrets that would change their lives forever. As David drove, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden hue over the landscape. The gentle hum of the truck's engine filled the silence, but it was punctuated by Sarah's animated voice as she shared more about her non-profit organization. "I started it 2 years ago," she explained, her eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "We provide temporary housing and job training for families experiencing homelessness. It's been tough, but we've managed to help over 50 families find stable housing and employment." "Wow, that's incredible," David replied, genuinely impressed. "What's been the biggest challenge?" Sarah paused, reflecting for a moment. "Funding is always a struggle. We rely heavily on donations and grants, but there's never enough. I'm hoping this meeting will secure a significant grant from a local foundation that could change everything for us." David could sense the weight of her hopes and dreams resting on this meeting. "You'll do great," he encouraged her. "With your passion and dedication, I'm sure they'll see the value in what you're doing." As they approached the city, the bustling streets contrasted sharply with the serene countryside they had just left behind. Sarah's nerves began to resurface as they neared the venue for her meeting, a sleek glass building that housed several prominent businesses and organizations. "Just drop me off here," she said, pointing to a curb outside the entrance. "I can walk in from here." "Are you sure?" David asked, glancing at her with concern. "I can park and walk in with you if you'd like." "No, really," she insisted, though her voice trembled slightly. "I need to gather my thoughts before I go in." David nodded, respecting her wishes. He pulled over and parked. As Sarah opened the door, she turned back to him with gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you so much for everything today. I don't know what I would have done without your help." "Just doing what anyone would do," he replied with a modest shrug. Before stepping out of the truck, Sarah hesitated for a moment. "Wait, can I give you something?" She rummaged through her bag and pulled out a small business card. "This is my organization's card. If you ever want to get involved or know someone who needs help, please reach out." David took the card, touched by her gesture. "I'll definitely keep this in mind," he said sincerely. With one last smile, Sarah stepped out of the truck and walked toward the entrance of the building. David watched her go, feeling an unexpected connection to this woman he had just met hours ago. There was something about her passion that resonated deeply within him. As he sat in his truck, waiting for her to enter, David couldn't shake off a sense of curiosity about Sarah's organization and its mission. He pulled out his phone and looked up her nonprofit online while waiting for her to finish. The website was filled with stories of families they had helped, photos of smiling children in new homes, and testimonials from grateful parents who had found stability after hardship. Each story tugged at his heartstrings, igniting a desire to contribute somehow. After about 20 minutes, Sarah emerged from the building looking both relieved and anxious. She walked briskly toward David's truck, her expression shifting from worry to joy as she reached him. "How did it go?" David asked as she climbed into the passenger seat. "I think it went well," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "They seemed genuinely interested in our work and asked some great questions." "That's fantastic," David replied enthusiastically. "I knew you could do it." "I won't know for sure until they make their decision," she cautioned, but there was an unmistakable lift in her spirits. As they drove away from the building, Sarah turned serious again. "I really appreciate your support today," she said softly. "Not just fixing my car, but being here for me during such an important moment." David smiled warmly at her sincerity. "It was my pleasure, really. I believe in what you're doing." They continued their conversation as they drove back toward where Sarah's car was parked. She shared more about her childhood experiences in foster care and how they shaped her desire to help others facing similar struggles. "I remember feeling so lost at times," she confessed. "But those experiences taught me resilience and compassion, qualities that drive me every day." David listened intently as she spoke about her journey, the challenges she faced while starting her organization, and how each success story fueled her determination to keep going. As they reached Sarah's car, David parked beside it and turned off the engine. He could see how much this work meant to her. It was more than just a job. It was a calling. "Let's check your car one more time before you head home," David suggested as they both got out. They opened the hood together again to ensure everything was functioning properly after adding coolant earlier. As they inspected it closely, David noticed something unusual. A small piece of paper tucked into one of the engine compartments. "What's this?" he wondered aloud as he pulled it out carefully. Sarah leaned closer to see what he had found. A faded receipt from a mechanic, dated just days before their encounter. "This is strange," she murmured as she read it over his shoulder. "It looks like they charged for repairs that weren't actually done." David frowned as he examined it further. That doesn't look right at all. Suddenly a thought struck him. This could be more than just a coincidence. It might be linked to something deeper within Sarah's life or organization. "What if this receipt leads us to uncover something significant?" David suggested thoughtfully. Sarah looked intrigued yet apprehensive at the same time. "What do you mean?" "Well," David began cautiously, "if this mechanic didn't do their job properly, and you've been facing issues because of it, maybe there's more going on here than meets the eye." As they stood by her car under the fading light of day, both felt an unspoken connection growing stronger, a sense that their lives were intertwined by fate in ways neither had anticipated. As David held the faded receipt in his hand, a sense of unease washed over him. He could see the confusion on Sarah's face as she processed what they had just discovered. "What do you think this means?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. David glanced at her, trying to gauge her reaction. "It could mean that the repairs you paid for weren't done properly. If that's the case, it might explain why your car overheated today." Sarah bit her lip, her brow furrowing in thought. "But why would they charge for work they didn't do? That doesn't make any sense." "Sometimes mechanics cut corners or take advantage of people who don't know much about cars," David explained. "It's frustrating, but it happens more often than you'd think." "I can't believe this," she said, shaking her head in disbelief. "I trusted them to do a good job. Now I feel like I've been taken advantage of." David placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Let's not jump to conclusions just yet. We should investigate this further. If they scammed you, they might be doing it to others too." Sarah nodded slowly, her determination returning. "You're right. I can't let this slide. I need to find out what's really going on." "Do you have any documentation from your previous visits to this mechanic?" David asked as they moved away from the car, heading back toward his truck. "I do. I keep all my records," she replied, her eyes lighting up with hope. "I'll grab them from my apartment." As they drove back toward Sarah's place, the atmosphere shifted from anxiety to resolve. David felt a growing sense of purpose. Helping Sarah uncover the truth about the mechanic was becoming more than just a favor. It felt like a mission. Once they arrived at Sarah's apartment, she quickly gathered her documents while David waited in the living room. The space was cozy but cluttered with papers and boxes, a testament to her busy life and dedication to her work. "Here it is," Sarah exclaimed as she returned with a folder full of receipts and paperwork related to her car repairs. She spread them out on the coffee table, and David leaned in for a closer look. As they sifted through the documents, David noticed several receipts from the same mechanic over the past few months, each one more expensive than the last. "This is troubling," he said, examining a particularly large charge for engine repairs that seemed excessive given the issues she had described. "Exactly. I thought I was being proactive by getting regular maintenance," Sarah replied, frustration creeping into her voice. "But now it feels like I've just been throwing money away." David picked up another receipt, dated just a week before their encounter, a charge for coolant replacement. "Look at this," he pointed out. They charged you for coolant when you clearly ran out today, regarding the grant proposal she had pitched earlier that day. She opened it eagerly, but suddenly froze as she read the message aloud. We regret to inform you that we have decided not to fund your organization at this time. David could see her heart sink as disappointment washed over her face. I can't believe this, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. All that work, all those families depending on us. Hey, David said gently, reaching out to comfort her. This doesn't define you or your organization's worth. You've already helped so many people. But it feels like such a setback, she replied, wiping away a tear. I thought this grant could change everything for us. It will take time, he reassured her, his voice steady and supportive. But you have something special. Your passion and commitment will resonate with others who want to help. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. You're right, she said finally, determination returning to her voice despite the setback. I won't give up so easily. They stepped out of the truck and walked toward the entrance, where a bell jingled as they pushed open the door. Inside, the air was filled with the smell of oil and metal. A few mechanics were busy working on cars, but one man stood at the counter, Tom, the owner of Reliable Auto Repairs. He looked up from his paperwork, his expression shifting from indifference to surprise as he recognized Sarah. Hey there, what brings you back? Tom asked casually, though David could sense an underlying tension in his tone. Tom, Sarah began, her voice steady but firm. We need to talk about my car and these receipts. She laid out the documents on the counter, pointing to the charges that had raised their suspicions. Tom's demeanor shifted instantly. He leaned back against the counter, crossing his arms defensively. What's this about? I did what you asked. No, you didn't, David interjected, stepping forward. You charged her for repairs that were never done. We have proof. Tom's brow furrowed as he glanced at the receipts. Look, I don't know what you're trying to pull here, but I stand by my work. Those repairs were necessary. Necessary? Sarah challenged, her voice rising slightly. You charged me for coolant replacement just last week. How do you explain my car overheating yesterday? Tom hesitated for a moment before responding. Sometimes things happen that are out of our control. Cars can be unpredictable. David felt a surge of anger at Tom's evasiveness. This isn't about unpredictability. It's about integrity. You're taking advantage of people who trust you. The tension in the room escalated as other mechanics paused to listen. Tom's eyes narrowed as he tried to regain control of the situation. I don't appreciate being accused like this without any real evidence. Sarah stepped closer, her voice unwavering. The evidence is right in front of you. If you truly care about your customers, you'll address this issue instead of deflecting blame. For a moment, silence hung in the air as Tom weighed his options. Finally, he sighed heavily and ran a hand through his hair. All right, let's take a look at your car again, he relented reluctantly. David exchanged a glance with Sarah. They both knew this was a small victory, but far from resolution. They followed Tom outside to where Sarah's car was parked. He popped the hood and began inspecting it, while David and Sarah stood nearby, watching closely. After several minutes of silence filled only by the sounds of tools clinking and engines humming around them, Tom finally spoke up. Well, it looks like there is indeed some coolant leaking, he admitted begrudgingly. Sarah crossed her arms defiantly. And how do you explain that? I paid for coolant replacement just last week. Tom shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. I can't say for sure what happened without looking into it further, he replied evasively. David stepped in again, feeling frustrated by Tom's lack of accountability. You need to take responsibility for your actions. If you've been scamming customers like Sarah here, it needs to stop. Tom shot David an irritated look, but remained silent. Look, Sarah said firmly, her voice steady despite her anger. All I want is a fair resolution. If you've made mistakes, own up to them and make it right." For a moment it seemed like Tom might refuse to budge again, but then something shifted in his expression, a flicker of recognition or perhaps guilt. "Fine," he said finally, his tone begrudgingly conceding defeat. "I'll refund you for those charges and fix your car properly this time. No extra cost." David felt a rush of relief wash over him as Sarah's face broke into a smile of triumph. "Thank you," she said sincerely but firmly. "I appreciate that." As they walked back toward their truck after finalizing everything with Tom, Sarah turned to David with gratitude shining in her eyes. "I couldn't have done this without you," she admitted softly. David shrugged modestly, but felt warmth spread through him at her words. "You had to stand up for yourself. I just helped give you that push." They climbed into his truck together and drove away from Reliable Auto Repairs, feeling victorious yet contemplative about what had just transpired. As they navigated through town toward Sarah's apartment once more, she turned serious again after a moment of silence. "Do you think this is happening to others too?" she asked quietly. "It's possible," David replied thoughtfully. "People might not realize they're being taken advantage of until it's too late." "That makes me want to do more," Sarah said resolutely. "If we can help others avoid this kind of situation, maybe we can make a difference." David nodded in agreement. Her passion was infectious. "We should raise awareness about businesses that exploit customers like this. I could use my platform to share stories, maybe even start a campaign," she suggested excitedly. As they discussed ideas for how to take action against unethical practices in their community during their drive home, both felt invigorated by their shared mission, one that went beyond just fixing cars or securing funding. It was about standing up against injustice and empowering others who might be facing similar struggles. With renewed purpose fueling their spirits once more, and an undeniable connection growing stronger between them, they prepared for whatever lay ahead. As David and Sarah drove back to her apartment, the atmosphere was charged with excitement and determination. They had just confronted the mechanic, and while it hadn't been easy, they had achieved a small victory. The thought of raising awareness about unethical practices filled them both with a renewed sense of purpose. "I can't believe we actually did that," Sarah said, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm. "I feel like I've taken a huge step forward, not just for myself, but for everyone who might be facing the same situation." David smiled, feeling proud of her resolve. "You stood up for yourself and others, and that's something to celebrate. You have a real opportunity to make a difference." As they arrived at Sarah's apartment, she turned to him with gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you for being there for me through all of this. I honestly don't know what I would have done without your support." "It was my pleasure," David replied warmly. "I'm glad I could help." Once inside, Sarah quickly made them both cups of coffee as they settled into her living room, still buzzing from their earlier confrontation. They discussed their ideas for raising awareness about the mechanic's practices and how they could potentially help others in similar situations. "What if we created a social media campaign?" Sarah suggested excitedly. "We could share stories of people who have been taken advantage of and provide resources on how to find trustworthy mechanics." "Great idea," David agreed. "We could also partner with local organizations that focus on consumer rights or even host workshops on how to maintain cars properly." As they brainstormed together, the conversation flowed effortlessly. They shared personal stories about their lives. David talked about his childhood fascination with cars and how it led him to become a mechanic, while Sarah opened up about her experiences in foster care and how they shaped her desire to help others. "I've always believed that even the smallest act of kindness can create a ripple effect," she said thoughtfully. "That's why I started my nonprofit, to give back and support those who need it most." David nodded, admiring her passion. You're doing incredible work. It's inspiring to see someone so dedicated to making a difference." As the evening wore on, they began discussing their hopes and dreams for the future. David revealed his aspiration to open his own auto repair shop one day, a place where people could trust that they would receive honest service without hidden fees or unnecessary repairs. "That sounds amazing," Sarah exclaimed. "You should definitely pursue that dream. You'd be great at it." Encouraged by her support, David felt more confident about his aspirations. "And what about you? What's your ultimate goal for your nonprofit?" he asked. "I want to expand our reach," she replied earnestly. "I dream of creating a network of resources that can help families not just find housing, but also gain access to education and job training programs." Their conversation continued late into the night as they shared laughter and ideas, each moment bringing them closer together. David felt an undeniable connection growing between them, a bond forged through shared experiences and mutual respect. Eventually, as the clock ticked past midnight, Sarah yawned and stretched her arms overhead. "I should probably let you go home," she said reluctantly. "Are you sure? I don't mind staying a bit longer," David offered. "No, really," she insisted with a smile. "You've already done so much today. I wouldn't want to keep you from your plans." "All right, then," he said, standing up and gathering his things. "But promise me we'll continue this conversation soon. I'd love to help you with your campaign, absolutely." Sarah agreed enthusiastically as she walked him to the door. As he stepped outside into the cool night air, David turned back to her one last time. "I'm really glad we met that day on the road," he said sincerely. "Me too," she replied softly, her eyes sparkling in the dim light from inside her apartment. "Absolutely," Sarah agreed enthusiastically as she walked him to the door. As he stepped outside into the cool night air, David turned back to her one last time. "I'm really glad we met that day on the road," he said sincerely. "Me too," she replied softly, her eyes sparkling in the dim light from inside her apartment. With one last smile exchanged between them, David headed home feeling invigorated, not just by their plans, but by the connection they had forged. Over the next few weeks, David and Sarah worked tirelessly on their campaign. They created social media pages where people could share their stories and experiences with mechanics, both good and bad, and provided resources for finding reliable service providers. Sarah's nonprofit also began collaborating with local businesses to host workshops on car maintenance basics, teaching families how to take care of their vehicles, while also empowering them with knowledge about consumer rights. The response was overwhelmingly positive. People began sharing their stories online, creating a community of support that resonated deeply within their town. One evening, as they wrapped up another successful workshop at Sarah's organization, she turned to David with excitement in her eyes. "We've made such an impact already. I can't believe how many people have reached out for help." David smiled proudly at her enthusiasm. "You're doing amazing work here. It's inspiring to see how far we've come together." As they stood side by side in front of a group of eager participants ready to learn more about car maintenance, David felt grateful for this journey they had embarked upon together, a journey that had started with a simple act of kindness on a roadside, but had blossomed into something much greater. In that moment, he realized that beyond their shared mission was something deeper, a burgeoning friendship that had the potential to grow into something more meaningful. As they exchanged glances filled with mutual respect and admiration amidst laughter and learning around them, both knew this was just the beginning of not only their campaign but also an unexpected partnership, one built on trust, hope, and shared dreams for a better future. Over the next few months, David and Sarah were fully immersed in expanding their initiative. Their social media pages had grown significantly, and local news outlets were starting to cover their efforts. People from all over the town shared their stories, expressing gratitude for the support and resources they were providing. One evening, David and Sarah were sitting in a cozy cafe, discussing new ideas for their campaign. Despite their busy schedules, they always managed to enjoy each other's company during these brainstorming sessions. "What should our next big initiative be?" Sarah asked, taking a sip of her coffee. David leaned back in his chair, his brow slightly furrowed in thought. "I've been thinking, what if we organized more workshops, but also created some video tutorials? That way, even people who can't attend in person could benefit from the information." Sarah nodded enthusiastically. "That's a great idea. And I was thinking, what if we partnered with local schools? We could teach young people basic car maintenance skills and consumer rights. It could be a way to empower the next generation." David's face lit up. "I love that. Imagine how much of a difference it could make if people learned these skills early on." Their conversation continued, each idea building on the other's suggestions. As they talked, Sarah noticed something different about David, his passion for the work they were doing and the way he genuinely cared about helping others. "You know," Sarah said, her tone softening, "none of this would have been possible without you. You've not only helped me stand up for myself, but also inspired me to dream bigger." David smiled, his eyes meeting hers. "You give me too much credit. This was your vision. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time." As the evening wore on, their plans became more concrete. They decided to reach out to local schools and community centers to propose their workshops, while also investing time in creating a series of educational videos. Before leaving the cafe, David hesitated for a moment. "Sarah, I've been meaning to tell you something." She looked at him curiously. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "Working with you on this has been one of the most fulfilling experiences of my life. And, well, I think I've started to feel something more than just friendship." Sarah's heart skipped a beat, but she smiled warmly. "David, I've been feeling the same way." For a moment they sat there, a quiet understanding passing between them. It wasn't just about their shared mission anymore. It was about the connection they had built through trust, teamwork, and mutual admiration.